My name's Adam McCaig. I'm one of the solutions managers at Saepio Information Security, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first of our Cyber Gaps to Cyber Gains webinars. The purpose of these sessions is really for us to look back on 2025 and provide a bit of an overview of the problems and challenges that the Saepio Solutions architecture team saw as consistent within our customers during 2025, and then introduce you to some of our technology partners who helped us solve those problems in some innovative and interesting ways. So today we've got representatives from the Saepio Solutions function, as well as from our partners Tynes, KnowBe4 and Wiz. And we're going to step through, as I said, some of the challenges that we saw with regularity that our customers were facing in 2025, and then look at some of the ways that we help support customers through those and develop their cyber resilience strategy. So first off, I get to go first. So the trend that I wanted to bring to this session was around the limited resources and the scale challenge that we saw lots of customers facing, not only in 2025 but for a while before that as well. I myself have talked about scale being a real challenge that we face within cyber for a while now, and I'll talk you through some of the detail on that problem. I'll be very pleased to introduce Jennifer Cox from Tynes to take you through some of the ways we addressed it as well shortly. So in 2025, we saw a number of things associated with this problem. We saw reducing dwell time from threat actors, meaning we had to do things more quickly. We saw the number of manual tasks being a burden to cyber teams increasing, from simple things around enriching the alerts that are being generated by our technology control systems, doing malware analysis, for example, or even simple IT ops, security ops processes like password reset. That, combined with the challenge I think everyone on this call can probably identify with around skills recruitment and retention, has meant that teams I've spoken to over 2025 have often seen a great deal of pressure in addressing the workload that they're facing. And then we combine that with ever increasing attack volumes that mean our business as usual day-to-day job is ever more involved and involving more and more specific tasks and actions. And this was a fairly consistent theme across all of the customers I personally engaged with in 2025, and I know that's the same for my colleagues. Regardless of sector or size, we found that consistent trend of there being too much to do, too little time to do it, and not enough resources, either through budget or headcount, to kind of deal with those in a way that customers were really happy with. The particular lever often changed from smaller businesses maybe having trouble around skill set to deal with things in the way that they wanted to, or the larger customers that we engage with just having far too many alerts and incidents to deal with regardless of team size. And that challenge of addressing the individual actions was consistent through one or more of those factors. The impact of this, and I'm sure some of us on this call have felt this, is that lots of security professionals have had to face long task lists of menial tasks under increasing amounts of stress and pressure, driving down employee satisfaction within our teams. And that obviously has a cultural impact. Happy, productive employees are the most effective. So those challenges have been felt by lots of our customers. The other thing that's impacted is the stress to drive down mean time to respond, to address the increasing of threats, to address the reduced in dwell time, and whether we can align through our resources to the business objectives for mean time to respond and recover have been put under increasing pressure. So how have Saepio and our partners, and in this instance, Tynes will expand on this, been addressing these challenges? Well, we've been looking at the successful deployment of automation and orchestration tooling that have taken some of those manual tasks away from individuals, move that into easily adoptable skill sets through no and low code workflow development, which means we're not increasing the skill burden on those teams that are stretched, but we are looking through the implementation of those tools to improve speed, improve accuracy, and take away the mundane from employees. So at that point, it's my pleasure to introduce Jennifer, who can take us through some of the ways that Tynes have supported our customers and others in delivering against some of those objectives. Jennifer.
Super, thanks a million. Let me just get my screen shared there now. You should be able to see that. Yeah, so my name is Jennifer Cox. I look after the solutions consultant team for EMEA and APAC in Tynes. But prior to this, I worked in vulnerability management for 10 years. And prior to that, I was a security practitioner. And weirdly enough, back then, those 400 million years ago, we were starting to get a little bit stressed about the volume of things that needed to be done and how much time it took to do it. So it's still a problem today, but it's on a much, much bigger scale. So my goal is to talk about what Tynes does to make life easier for those of you that are drowning in those alerts and logs at the moment. So I think everybody that's here in the room can relate to it, and I'm sure anybody listening as well, is how the SecOps side of things is obviously fundamentally changing, but not always because we want it to, just because we have to kind of keep up with these things. So the old playbook for this was really simple. More security threats meant we got more analysts, more tickets meant there was more firefighting, but the math on that broke a long time ago and definitely got worse during COVID when you have your remote workforce and so many other things that you're trying to manage that you don't even have the control over from that perspective. So today the real change isn't about hiring more people, it's about rethinking who does what and using your skill set for what they're there for. And then in my case, it's about how the intelligent workflow platform lets you redistribute that work in the simplest way possible. So I thought I'd start with a few stats. We all love a few stats. And we see that businesses are blocked because the technology is disconnected in where they're at. Not just on the security teams, you've teams creating data, you've got information across the company that all relate to the security teams and the IT teams and too. And having that disconnect is preventing the teams from operating efficiently. So you've got this deluge of messages coming from all over the place and alerts and noise, and trying to tidy all that, but make sure that you're focusing on the things that actually need your attention at any given time. So we're seeing IT leaders and security leaders that are saying that the majority of the data that they have is inaccessible across all of the teams that need it. So you've got issues there where the collaboration is, or the lack of, is slowing down the teams, or the need to sanity check 400 times. Has everybody got what they need? And we've seen in our research that 60% of the workers that found searching for information was something that negatively impacted the actual work product, the thing that they're trying to do. So this doesn't just create frustration, which I'm sure any of you have felt at this stage for the individuals. And then what we're also seeing is that security leaders are reporting that it creates a meaningful threat to the security posture. So it's another challenge that isn't always being anticipated in the day-to-day. So when systems and people aren't talking to each other, then the teams are forced to address it kind of manually. So they've got like half ideas of what the situation entails, and they're pulling bits of information from across the company. And we've seen that cost companies upwards of $13 million a year. So what I'm going to do is show you how easy it is to actually set up a Tynes story. I'm just going to stop sharing this screen and share another one. Bear with me 1 second. So in the Times library, so if you just search for Google, or in Google, don't search for Google, look for Times Library, what you'll get is this page. And this is a publicly accessible page that's full of all of our library content, which is over 1,100 stories, as we call them. Stories are our workflows that anybody can use. And even if you're using a community edition of Times, you can have a look at the stories that are here. For the sake of example today, what I've done is I'm going to have a look for our friends Wiz and see what stories that we have here. And it's bringing up basically any story that uses the Wiz product. So we're vendor agnostic. You can use our tool with anything that has an API. We don't care anything else about the tool. Once it has an open API, you can use it nice and simple. These are different use cases that we've had people already use, whether they were people in-house build it or our end users build it and submitted it to our library. I'm going to use the top one here just to walk you through what it looks like. So this is a really nicely articulated story that uses 4 products. So there's the Wiz product, the AWS, Jira, and Slack. We've integrated with all of them to create a nice, clean workflow and automate a painful tool. Anyone that's dealing with S3 buckets, I know about you, but it's like, I don't know, it's like learning that wheels are round. Like this has been around for such a long, long time. But there still are people that have those exposed S3 buckets out there. So you want to find out about them as soon as possible. Now, Wiz helps you find them. And then what we do with this is we use our tool to get those findings. We decide what we want to do with a bit of research on the findings, look at the results, create a ticket in Jira, and then send a message to Slack to let people know that a ticket has been created. Decide, are we able to remediate this issue based on information that you know and have entered into it around the systems? Maybe it's production, maybe it's not production. You can make those decisions yourself. And then if there is remediation that can be done, we'll add that prompt to the ticket. And then we split out what we do at the end of that. So if it can be remediated, we've decided, okay, let's go ahead and remediate it. This might be the rule that we have in place. Add details into the Jira to say it's been remediated, add the comments, close off the ticket and close the loop. If it can't be remediated, or maybe it's in production or there's some reason why you don't want to remediate it at any given time, then you can also choose to ignore it. You put in your rules there. Add an issue comment into Jira to say why you're ignoring it, so that if the human at the other end of it then is looking through the tickets, they can understand why you haven't actioned things. Maybe it needs to go to somebody else or a secondary view on it. So nice and straightforward. One thing you'll also find within the library that we have is that you'll find really nice descriptions about what it is that the story does and how to set it up, things that you need at any particular time, so you have your checklist to go. So I don't know about you. I always thought I was a very imaginative person, but clearly not when you give me a blank page and ask me to build something from scratch. So having a template like this to build and put in, I can easily see where I might change things or where I might adjust them depending on, maybe I don't use Jira, maybe I use a different ticketing tool. And it's nice and easy to be able to see what you do differently for your business than when you look at a template like this. And to show you then how easy it is, you just click import, and I think it's gone off my screen now. Has it? Has it gone to another tab, or can you still see that? No. Okay. What I'm going to do is share. When I hit import, it'll automatically open up my Times instance, which looks like this. Now we're back, I think. And I select which one I want to pop it into, and it will then bring the exact same template into my actual Times edition. So here it is now, where I can actually make some amendments to it, and I can see the tasks here on the left-hand side that I can use. So let's say I decide that everything here is perfect, but in the event that it is an S3 bucket that I don't really care about, and I want to maybe, I don't know, shut it down, I'll put in another trigger, as simple as that, and then connect it from this last can it be remediated or not prompt, add in an additional task here saying that I want to shut it down. And then at the end of it, then I'm going to have added to Jira that the device has been shut down and it's to be retired or blown up or whatever it is that I want to do from there. And that's how easily I can do it. I'll just click on the particular task, add in the information that's needed. And same here, add in the information that's needed. You don't need to be able to code to do that. But if you are curious and you want to get in, you can go look at it in its raw format. I all prefer that because I'm ancient and I learned from scratch all the code inside of things. But if you want to use it in a much more intuitive fashion, you've got the builder then from there. And simple as that, then you're ready to rock and have made the adjustments to an existing template that's there. So with that, I'm going to hop back to my original PowerPoint. And here we go. So what happens then when you get it right? I love a few stats. So here's what we see. When workflows are real, so when people see them in actionable form, like that one from AWS, and actually we also have no before ones as well, just so that nobody feels left out. If you go through and search the library, we've got a bunch for them too. The easiest way to do it is just to have a look for whatever tools you have and find out what stories we have in the library from there. When they're real, we're seeing the pilots advance into production at really high rates. So in 94% of cases where people use it, build a workflow that makes sense, they hold on to it, they keep it from there, and they're getting value out of it. Because once you fix the plumbing, then the value is really obvious. It makes sense. And teams start asking things like, what else can we do with it outside of maybe even the security team? So when people integrate it, what we're seeing is that companies incorporate an average of 68 tools per platform, which sounds ridiculous. But if you look at your phone, how many apps have you got on it? You can very easily scale up to the 68 tools in any business. And especially if you start incorporating tools outside of the security team, ticketing systems, HR systems, before with regards sanity checking with Okta and making sure people are keeping up to date with their training. So it's very easily done. And it's not just about convenience in this stage. What we're seeing is this tenfold shift in what teams can actually get done. And then there's the leadership angle of it as well. 75% of the companies expand those workflows into other teams then as well. So the cybersecurity team are usually the go-to, the best practices team, the expectation there. So then you'll see teams like maybe finance will pick it up, or the ops team, or HR picks it up, and it expands then from there. So you're integrating all of your tools into one single location. But you can also break down the team so not everybody sees everything. So the model works. It works really, really well. On the human side of things here, what we're seeing is things like we're seeing teams reclaim the time of a full-time employee, equivalent of a full-time employee. They're cutting their health check times by 99%. They're hitting 80 to 90% alert coverage without hiring more people, but it's not about replacing the people. It's about letting the people that are doing the work do the work that matters instead of the work that drains them. So like Adam was talking about earlier, people are getting burnt out and are getting fed up and drowning in alerts. When I started to work in cybersecurity, I wanted to work on the fun stuff. I don't want to drown in alerts and logs. So you can at least let your team get back to using their brains for what they wanted to do in the first place. And that is it for me. So hopefully you'll have questions later on, write them down, make a note of them, and I'm going to hand back over now to the Saepio team. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Jennifer. That was really good. Appreciate that. Guys, if you've got any questions that you want to ask Jennifer, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask that you maybe add them to the chat and we can look to address them at the end. If anyone's got something really burning now, by all means, raise your hand. But if you think it can wait a little bit, then either reach out to us directly after the session or pop it in the chat now and we'll try and address it as we go. Now I'm going to introduce Tom Hollinrake from the Saepio team to go through his view on 2025.
Hello, so my name is Tom Hollinrake. I'm one of the Saepio solutions architects here at Saepio, and I've been, the last 5 years, been very heavily involved in the human risk side of cybersecurity. And I'll be passing over to Ignacio, who'll be going through some of KnowBe4's capabilities in this area shortly after my piece. So in terms of 2025, one of the biggest risks we saw with a lot of the organizations we worked with is human risk, but also human culture within organizations, and the ability to actually instill a positive human culture had then had a positive impact on the security of many of the businesses we worked on. And one of the biggest risks we're still seeing transitioning into 2026 is there is still a very heavy over-reliance on traditional security awareness measures. And, working with some of the partners at Saepio, we've managed to begin, I guess, instilling positive security measures, building out better, more effective security curriculums, and actually transitioning away from those outdated town hall style security awareness meetings and positioning tooling that would actually effectively gauge the change in security behavior and security culture with a lot of our customers. I think human risk is something we talk about all the time, and this isn't just about external attack vectors and attack factors, and we are looking at human risk internally in organizations as well. And by positioning and building a positive security culture, that internal risk starts to remediate pretty significantly. And effectively, traditional approaches remain pretty stagnant in the fact that actually they're not accurately remediating some of the individual risks of users. So one of the other impacts we're seeing, or one of the bigger risks we're seeing, is by taking more of a traditional stance on human risk and security awareness, you're not actually accurately measuring and then remediating the risks posed by individual users. So you'll have employees within your organizations which will have different access to different systems, different roles, and therefore different risk profiles. So one of the a statistic that I think really resonates well is, this came from one of the breach surveys last year. 10% of your users are posing 75% of the risk to your organization. And unless you're actually going away and measuring where that risk is stemming from, you are still having gaps in your security posture. In terms of, the who has been impacted and how, every organization we speak to has an issue with human risk, and it's important that every organization takes a human risk seriously. And whether that be external threats, as I mentioned earlier, or internal human negligence, or anything in between, it's really important that actually you are covering the right bases with your employees and then consolidating your human risk efforts with some of the existing security investments you've made. External contractors continue to pose a heightened risk and are often overlooked in security awareness programs and initiatives. It's really important that you're leveraging tools to ensure those employees that potentially are temporary employees or contracted employees are still receiving the necessary human security awareness in order to protect your business. And following on from this, the lack of human behaviour analysis leaves gaps in all businesses across all industries. So, by fully relying on security awareness training and security awareness modules, you're not necessarily leveraging some of the existing security tooling you've got in place. So being able to take real-time analytics and behavior analysis from those tools, if you have endpoint security and you also email security tooling, you can then paint a really, really big picture of where your risk actually lies in the organization. And the impact, we're seeing of a lot of organizations that we're working with is, with a heightened and more sophisticated attack vector when it comes to social engineering. It's, the leveraging of AI and, agentic AI and generative AI from attackers. It means that your organization and your employees are going to be seeing a heightened risk in those social engineering attempts. Spear phishing and targeted attacks are increasingly more common. We aren't just looking for red flags on emails when it comes to spelling mistakes or formatting errors. The risk and the sophistication of social engineering is really, really effective right now. A lot of organizations will still be looking at blanket training employees, running the same security awareness curriculums across everyone, utilizing tools like KnowBe4, who you will speak to in a second. We can really start to understand and build out effective and targeted security awareness curriculums for your employees. Your finance team might have a completely different risk profile to your HR team, and therefore might need to or require a completely different set of training modules and phishing simulations. This is also echoed in a lot of compliance requirements we're seeing, specifically around things like ISO 27001. There is now a need for effective training that's aimed at a role by role level. And without consolidating these existing security awareness measures you're taking and security awareness training curriculums into things like your email security and other security investments, you're not really fully maturing your security, your human risk management curriculum. There's definitely two sides to this. You've got your security awareness training, and then you've got your human risk management. There's no need for these to be separate now. We can really start to consolidate the two of them effectively. In terms of solving this challenge, there's a lot of measures we can now take. We are looking at consolidating human risk management into one platform. Being able to leverage data from your email security tools and your security awareness tools allows you to paint a bigger picture of the risk profiles and risk scoring of each employee, but also looking at things like DLP and preventative email security tools in order to really protect your employees while leveraging those statistics and human behavior analysis. I think, with the wider security investments, there's now tooling out there which will allow you to build out a better picture. So plugging your security awareness and human behavioral dashboards into things like your endpoint security, your Siemens source, for example, and really getting an idea of exactly the risky behaviors being committed on a regular basis by employees. That's going to really help determine exactly how you're then going to leverage some of the security awareness training modules to better effectively train your employees on real-time risks. And then leveraging things like real-time coaching and teachable moments. So being able to actually nudge users where and when they make those risky behaviors in real time is really, really important. It's something we can do now with the advancements in some of the security awareness training tools that we're utilizing. And then also centralizing all the dashboarding and board reporting into human risk management reporting is also going to help bring a more positive security culture across the board and internally into your organization. So I'm now going to pass over to Ignacio, who's going to discuss some of KnowBe4's capabilities in this space.
Nice. Perfect. Thank you for that, Tom. Hello, everybody. My name is Ignacio. I'll start sharing my screen now. Feel more than free to call me Nacho. So let's see. Might as well share the entire screen. Perfect. Hopefully everybody can see that. We're going to be talking about PDP. We're going to do a bit of a full overview that means we're going to be talking about prevent, defend, and protect. Now, again, we don't only want to focus on how exactly we're able to stop these threats from coming into the email environment, but just like Tom pointed out, really talk about the risk and how we help decrease that risk. Now, these are the different products that I will be talking about today: defend, prevent, protect. I cannot really go into too much detail into every single one of them. Otherwise, we would spend just 3 days here of me just talking. But first, we will start with defend. Now, defend is meant to stop those advanced email attacks. Of course, we're using AI. I'm sure everybody has been hearing the word of AI nowadays. But we really mean to do that. Essentially, we don't work like your traditional sec, in where somebody like the admin, for example, might need to spend 2 hours inputting policies or rules. Everything really has that out of the box functionality. As you can see here on the pictures, the users learn from those real phishing emails that are arriving into their inbox from the banners. So the banners can either be informational or suspicious. So those would be the yellow banners, or dangerous. Those would be the red amber banners. Now, we are really aware of banner fatigue. We do expect the user to feel like it is a novelty. It is something that will actually make them, sit up on their chair and look at that email and be more cautious if they're actually seeing something like a red banner within the email. Of course, if they see that, they would be prompted to hopefully not interact with that email, not click within any links, or maybe reach out to their admin. They can do that with workflows we actually offer within Defend as well. Now, with those banners, we, of course, engage and educate users. We reduce the admin overheads. The console is pretty intuitive, pretty easy to use as well. And of course, we reinforce those legacy products from KnowBe4 once again. So the content that the sort of training that users do by maybe watching the videos or doing quizzes with the content that KnowBe4 offers, or maybe going through those phishing simulations is not enough anymore. They also need to get trained on those real phishing attacks that are going for that user only. So we could see this as tailored and bespoke training for every single one of those users, hence reducing that risk that the user actually falls for a real phishing attack that is slipped through. As anybody knows, there is no silver bullet in cybersecurity. An email will eventually make it through. So if our users know what they need to be careful with, then that's the best way we can go about it to reduce risk. Now, this is why Defend is different. It does overlap a little bit with the other slide I mentioned before, but it focuses a lot more on the value. So like I mentioned before, we're putting banners on real phishing emails, and these are meant to train your users and make them aware of the threats that are out there. We do have that reporting capability. The dashboard does a pretty good job of showing the admins the numbers that they need to be looking into, maybe how many dangerous emails they have received over the past month. And of course, through the console, we make it really, really easy for the admins to remediate or start any sort of automation that they need to start as well. It is an easy and intuitive console, like I've mentioned. And of course, all of this functionality is out of the box, we won't have multiple calls with the admins or with any of the end users in where we're asking them what sort of policies do they want to add into the Fend. Everything is meant to just be set up and is pretty much up and running. And of course, we offer that advanced threat detection, as we've seen before, throughout multiple POVs that I've done with prospects. We are able to stop your usual VIP impersonation, CEO impersonations, any sort of compromised accounts, attacks. Those attacks especially are really hard to spot, mainly because in the past you would only use whitelisting or blacklisting. You cannot stop a business email compromised attack by blacklisting. Otherwise, you just wouldn't receive any emails from your supply chain, for example. And if you whitelist them, you're then open to attacks if they do get compromised. Regarding KnowBe4 integrations, Tom already mentioned the content that we offer, those phishing simulations. I spoke about how we reinforce that training by actually showing users those banners within real phishing emails they're receiving within their inbox. Of course, this doesn't mean that we don't stop emails. We do stop emails if we consider them high confidence phish, meaning that we will just quarantine them using Microsoft Quarantine. In this case, the one I want to talk about is smart groups. So we nicely integrate with smart groups by KnowBe4 ingesting telemetry from the Fend. So for example, if we see Tom getting a lot of phishing emails that are sort of CEO impersonations or maybe link payload attacks, Tom would be added into a campaign that has a specific training tailored for that. And if he receives any sort of phishing training, phishing emails into his inbox, the phishing emails will also resemble that. So he might get phishing emails regarding CEO impersonation or those link payload attacks that I mentioned before. Now let's get into prevent. So we've talked all about the inbound. We're not going to focus a little bit more on the outbound side of things. It's all about stopping that misdirected email. So for example, if I send a lot of confidential information to Tom, but all of a sudden I find myself sending that confidential information to Adam for whatever reason, we expect prevent to do something about it. What it should do is prompt at the time of send. So, and then it would also give me a bit of an explanation on why it prompted. So it would tell me in this case, hey, Nacho, you usually send confidential information to Tom, not Adam. Are you sure you want to continue doing what you're doing essentially? And I can go back and change the CC field, the BCC field, who the email is going to, etc. We also want to stop the data exfiltration of emails. So for example, end user sending emails to their personal emails. It is something that, a lot of companies they have not the best view on it. So we can stop things like that. And the aim here is to preserve those information barriers and making sure that everybody's getting the emails they're supposed to be getting, and that emails that are not supposed to be going out, they're not going out. Now, we also have that reporting capability, right? If you maybe get a room full of people and you ask them who has been sending emails to their personal emails or who has been misdirected emails, no one is going to raise a hand, and admins definitely need to be aware of that. With the console that we offer, admins will have visibility of all of it as well. Now, this is how it would work. We have that real-time feedback. So it works as an add-in that sits in the ribbon within your Outlook. If you click on that add-in, as you are typing out that email, KnowBe4 is already getting an idea of, does this email belong to be sent out or not? So we will be giving the user that email advice. We will be letting them know if the email is medium risk or if the email doesn't pose a threat at all. Of course, I do not expect any end user to actually have the add-in open and while they're typing their email to be looking at that. That's why we have the prompts at the time of send. So this is essentially how it looks. These prompts shouldn't pose any sort of time delay in sending an email. We ensure all of our clients that the prompts will appear in between 0 to 5 seconds. And if the email or if the prompt, takes more than 5 seconds to appear, we have a fail-safe mechanism for that. It would go onto a gateway. We would continue processing that email within the gateway, and then we can send any sort of bounce back email back to the user asking them if they wanted to send that email. So it doesn't always have to work like a prompt. We can also send a bounce back email just like this. Now, before we actually go into the slide, if I go into the previous one, I also want to point out once again, how we're reducing that risk is not only about not letting the user send that email out, it's also telling them what exactly they're doing wrong. In this case, they were sending an email to Emily. Emily is not usually in that conversation, is not something that Prevent recognizes. And so we're telling the user, are you sure you want to continue sending this email, pretty much. Perfect. This is how the bounce back email looks, and this is how it would look all the time for a mobile phone user. So not a lot of other tools that are claiming to do the same thing as Prevent on the market are able to protect mobile phones, so it's good that we're on the space as well. And again, we still give you that information onto why exactly we're prompting you. In this case, it's not about Emily not belonging within the email. It's about you adding too many people on the CC field or the BCC field. And of course, the users can always decide to send anyway, or maybe they go back and change whatever they need to change within the email. Now, this, as you have seen throughout the presentation, is a soft block, but we can also offer a hard block. And we would do that with Prevent Enterprise. All of the functionality I've shown you so far, everything I've spoken about so far has been about Prevent, but we also have Prevent Enterprise. Now, definitely, we're not going to look into all of this, so don't worry, I'm not going to be reading line by line. But if we just focus on the last two sort of points there, data loss prevention, rule enforcement, that's exactly what I mean by a hard block. So we would be able to enable that with Prevent Enterprise. And then we have content analysis. With content analysis, we're focusing more on analyzing attachments within emails. And we're focusing, this would be a really good use case for your law firms, for example, in where if I raise a case with a specific law firm, I have an identifier in where every time they write me an email, that email has a specific number. Maybe that number is within an attachment. Content analysis with Prevent Enterprise would be able to recognize that that sort of identifier, that number within the attachment belongs to Ignacio, is meant to be sent to Nacho Ignacio, but is not meant to be sent to Tom, for example. Perfect. Now, regarding Protect, one of the, I would say, easiest products that we have within the suite to really understand. If you want to encrypt emails, we give you the capability to encrypt emails as well. We can apply the appropriate levels of security. We can also share and protect large files. In here, there is really no limit. If we look at it from a logical point of view, there is, of course, a limit, but we're talking about terabytes. So hopefully that makes it really accessible, really useful for people that are sending sort of big chunks of data within email. I doubt it will ever get to sort of terabytes being sent via email. You can, of course, review and revoke send items from the web service. So when I encrypt an email and I send it to somebody, that somebody will get a notification email, which you will see how it looks in the next 2 minutes. They click on that notification email, they go to a web service, and they're able to see the encrypted email from there. Me, as the sender, I can also go into that web service and revoke the permission to view that email. So you're in charge of the email you send at all times, pretty much. And of course, we also do provide flexible authentication. This means that for the end user, they might have to authenticate themselves in some sort of way sometimes, but not always. We can really make it really easy for them to access the email, but we can also make it a bit more complicated, so we are absolutely sure that the person that received that email is the one that is supposed to be opening that encrypted email. This is why Protect is different. Again, it does overlap a little bit with the other slide, just with Defend, but we focus a bit more on the value. So it is really, really, really incredibly easy to use for the sender. It uses the same add-in as Prevent. We already saw it in one of the previous slides. And the only thing you do when you're writing an email before sending it out, you choose the level of encryption you want and you send it out. We have those flexible authentication options. So again, the recipient won't always need to authenticate themselves, but they can, but at sometimes they might need to. We also have that customization available for the notification emails. This will make a lot more sense with the next slide, in where we can match the logo and the color scheme of any company. We integrate with Prevent. Something I always like to say that a lot of people in my position usually don't mention is that Prevent and Protect really do work better together. Once we've learned from your environment after Prevent has understood the sending patterns of, for example, myself, the moment I am sending confidential information out of my business is not only about if I'm sending it to the right people, am I also sending it in the right manner? So Prevent can actually prompt at the time of send once again and tell me, hey, Ignacio, are you sure you shouldn't encrypt this email? And I can, of course, go ahead and encrypt it. And we also offer that large file sharing service. This is how the notification email looks when it lands into the inbox of the recipient. And once again, like I mentioned, we can change the logo here at the top. We can match the color scheme of any company just to make sure that whoever has Protect, they're happy with it. And if a recipient receives that email, they're not wondering where it came from, pretty much. Of course, there is no software to download, and it is a simple web link to get access to the email. This is how you can protect an email if Prevent prompts you at the time of send. You have the different types of encryption right there. So one-click access makes it really easy for the recipient. They just click on the link, access the email. Authentication required means that when they click on the link, they will have to actually either create a login within KnowBe4's infrastructure. But if they have already opened protected emails in the past, which is really likely, they probably already have a login, but creating a login should be no biggie, and then you just have it. Restricted access means that the sender can actually input a code within the email. So the recipient wouldn't necessarily need to authenticate themselves. They just need to be aware of that code. So for example, if we are part of the NHS and we're saying confidential medical records to myself, maybe within restricted access, the NHS decides to set up my birth date as the code. So I know that when I receive an encrypted email from them, I can just put my birth date and I'll be the only one viewing that email. And that would be it. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. I'll pass it over to Saepio now.
Thanks, Ignacio. That was great. If you want to stop sharing your screen, I'll introduce Duncan Stobie again from the Saepio side. Just in the interest of time, thank you for your questions, Jane and Anchoress. We'll answer those either in the background now or come back to you directly. But without more ado, over to Duncan.
Great, nice one. Cheers, Adam. Appreciate everyone jumping on. So good to be introduced. So I'm Duncan. I'm one of the solutions managers here at Saepio. My role really is sort of primarily focused working with our sort of cloud focused and digital native customers, particularly helping them sort of right size their technical controls when it comes to cloud security programs. And really what we're going to talk a lot today around is so obviously some of the challenges we've seen over the last 12 months, particularly within sort of increasing exposures, but also some of the silos we see that seem to create themselves within these programs, which require sort of collaboration across multiple teams. So having a look back then in terms of what we saw, so I suppose the first thing to call out really is, I suppose a lot of these problems aren't necessarily new. Like if you look at any, I suppose, risk report that you might see from any sort of significant vendor, everyone's talking about that, attackers are weaponizing, threats quicker and quicker. But actually, I think if you look at some of the things that happened over the last 12 months, particularly around the announcement that Anthropic did, where they announced effectively that there was an attack group that leveraged effectively like a jailbroken version of Claude, and they automated between 80 and 90% of an attack, and that included everything from reconnaissance right up to coding exploits, again with like minimum human intervention. I think that was a real sort of wake up around the potential of how much this could get even significantly quicker. So that's definitely a big trend we've seen. Outside of that, I would say really the other parts of it is around like conflicting priorities we see. So effective cloud security, it sort of remains responsibility of I suppose like a diverse group of teams, and often whose maybe their primary role isn't security. Like developers are the classic example of that, right? They're targeted and under pressure to deliver and meet deadlines, release new capabilities, whereas security are more tasked around, I suppose, the responsibility of the resilience and ultimate security of those platforms. So while the security is a part of their role, it's not the primary one, which can sometimes lead to sort of conflicting priorities. We've also still continued to see, I'd say, like risk identification and remediation happening in silos. And what really mean by that is effectively remediation teams are being tasked with almost fixing hypothetical risks, so things that could present a risk in sort of runtime environments rather than the actual vulnerabilities that are running in those environments themselves. So really this is the concept of like shifting left that's been a buzzword for a number of years, but actually implementing it is really challenging when I suppose the view of risk across these development pipelines are very much just purely horizontal rather than vertical. Some of the other areas we saw focus on, the Cloud Security Alliance released a really good report last year that reviewed, particularly around sort of like what are the KPIs and metrics that cloud security programs, how are they measuring their efficacy? And they found that actually the majority of organizations, the most widely used KPIs were really around the frequency of incidents and the severity. But actually when they go on to talk about the causes of those breaches, actually the majority of them were preventable. So about a third each were responsible. One was misconfiguration and the other one was excessive permission. So although we're there measuring on the number of incidents, actually really a shift needs to be made to, I suppose, more tying efficacy KPIs and measurements around resilience and preventative controls as well. When we look about who's been impacted and sort of how, like when we talk about some of those different teams responsible for these cloud security programs, you know, security teams struggling to drive engagement from others. We've got cloud operations and remediation teams that are obviously struggling with prioritization. We've touched on developers can be drowning in these remediation tasks that might not, you know, present a real risk in production. We've got governance teams with a sort of never-ending list of audits where they're struggling to really measure and demonstrate, I suppose, alignment with particular frameworks within the cloud. And then a SOC team, again, there's a lot of, again, talk across all parts of security around, you know, too much noise within the SOC and various others. But actually, it's one of the other things we saw in practice within cloud security teams over the last 12 months is more around a challenge with actionable threat intelligence when it comes to cloud. So if you look at, for example, like the NPM attacks and stuff that were really high profile last year, a lot of SOC teams were being asked a question of, you know, are we impacted? Where are we impacted? How are we impacted? These types of things. And actually, because of the scale and the ephemeral nature of cloud, it's often quite difficult to really understand whether there is a real threat or not. So trying to make that as actionable as possible is, again, a real challenge and something that certainly we feel needs to be addressed. And then I suppose just finally, before I hand over to Abdullah to sort of touch on a bit from the Wiz perspective and how they're overcoming these, is really understanding that, I suppose, solving this challenge. Context is a word, again, that's an overused term within security, but I really do think within cloud security specifically, it really is fundamental. I think if you're understanding, you know, the resource type, you know, who owns that workload, what's the business context, what's the identity and permissions information, you know, does it contain sensitive information, which line of code is attributing to this vulnerability, etc. Having all of those bits of context is absolutely vital, because then when you think about all those different profiles of teams that are responsible for these cloud security programs, it's essentially how do we present that context to those individuals on a role or persona based view, so ultimately they can make decisions more effectively with the right information. We also think from I suppose the point we touched on around the concept of sort of shifting left, actually really starting left again is an area that we try and focus on. So, and what we really mean by that is what are the controls that we can make within the I suppose development phase to minimize noise upstream. So think of, you know, hardening container images, for example, leveraging infrastructure as code as widely as we can as well. And then also then just finally then I suppose more of a mindset change as much as anything around what should we be measuring from like a KPI perspective that's really going to be focused on resilience and preventative controls rather than just the number of incidents as well. So all good. So with that, Abdullah, I'll hand over to yourself. You want to do a quick intro to your role and yeah, let you crack on with some of your content.
Thank you very much, Duncan. I'm Abdullah, lovely to meet you all, and I'm a partner solutions architect at Wiz. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start to show you what the platform looks like from a capability perspective, but then also, I guess, what is it that means for your organization, and actually how can that help you guys? And Wiz, our kind of main philosophy here really is to secure everything built and run in the cloud. So what we do is we try to collate all the information that we have of all the technologies in your cloud environments to help you absolutely reduce those risk footprints. And in terms of actually how we then connect, it's incredibly easy and it's all done agentlessly. It can connect to any of your cloud environments, and it does it basically within 15 minutes. All it does is take a snapshot of your environment, and what it looks at is things like misconfigurations, what technologies are running in the environment, and kind of how they're all linked together to then kind of build that risk footprint. So what you can see on my inventory side here is every single technology that's running on every single one of all of my environments, which can be incredibly useful from a shadow IT perspective, because what that means is you can gain that visibility, kind of turn the lights on to understand what is actually running. And sometimes there are times where the visibility is lacking in cloud, especially in multi-cloud environments. So this kind of single pane visibility view is incredibly useful to understand what is actually running, and are there things that are running that you don't actually need, for example, from a cost perspective. Now, one thing that we do have, which is an incredibly useful feature, is at the bottom here we have lenses. Now, if I were, for example, a vulnerability manager, I would look into this vulnerability management pane, but according to my role, I would look at different lenses. And this is basically designed to make things as easy as possible for the users to look at things that are relevant to their roles, because not everyone needs to understand everything about the cloud at all times. So let's say, for argument's sake, I'm a vulnerability manager and I want to look at vulnerability management. Now, everyone knows that this is an incredibly difficult and arduous task, and you get lots and lots of different alerts, as Jennifer mentioned and Duncan mentioned earlier as well. And one of the things that we're really trying to do here is reduce the amount of noise that we see here. So I'm going to take your attention to the impact stages here. You can see that I have 94,000 critical and high vulnerabilities that are given by the vendors on the cloud resources themselves. I can see of that there are 51,000 with exposed resources, and of that there are only 109 with a critical attack path. So what we're trying to do here really is to reduce the amount of noise, and also try and, with that kind of added context and visibility of everything that's running in the cloud, things like misconfigurations, things like vulnerabilities, which of them do you actually need to go in and focus on first? Because these are the most critical, and what we're really trying to do here is reduce kind of the mean time to detect and then respond to that, to those potential issues. Now, let's say I manage all aspects of security, and I really want to try to understand from a posture perspective, how is my cloud environment looking? So what I can do is I can go into my issues tab here. And again, what we're trying to do is reduce the amount of noise, but also from a posture perspective, given all of the context that we've correlated together about the cloud environment, about the misconfigurations and vulnerabilities, with a lot of other context as well, we can show you where are you at most at risk in terms of your actual cloud footprint. And I'll show you one in particular that is a good example. There is an internet-facing container, and that has initial access vulnerabilities, as you can see on the top here, and there are clear text cloud keys with data access to sensitive data. Now, anyone in a kind of technical position should hopefully know that there are many issues here, and this is something that you probably need to go in and fix immediately, because this is something that could pose a very big risk to your footprint, and an attacker could potentially gain access to this sensitive data, which is something that you really want to reduce and stop. So you can see all of the different risk domains that ties to. So there is unprotected data, there are insecure use of secrets, there's external exposure, and there are vulnerabilities. And you can also see at the bottom here, there is a code to cloud pipeline. So you can link it to things like your GitHub or GitLab repositories, to basically understand where is it that this lies in my repository and who actually wrote the code. So I can see here that there is potential source of code here, and I can see here that S. Doyle, he's our friend, but he's written some code that has some vulnerabilities in it, and we need to basically go in and tell him that there are potential issues. Now, when it comes to actually remediating potential issues, what we can do is either automatically or manually run actions to create tickets. You can create tickets through Jira or Slack or ServiceNow, whichever one you are using and is most relevant to yourselves, to try and make that as easy as possible to give the right context to the right people at the right time. And what we also do is, given all of this information, we can create a security graph. So these are all the technologies within the system, and we can see that there is a particular kind of risk footprint. And why this is a critical risk is this is a toxic combination of a lot of different potential risks that I showed you earlier. You can see that there are things that are exposed, there are vulnerabilities, etc. So hopefully this isn't too complicated. I'm going to try and show you what this really means. So this is a potential attack path. So an attacker could potentially go in through the internet. There are exposed resources. You can see that there is an application endpoint here. You can see that there is a screenshot, and there are things like secrets and URLs and access tokens that are accessible to the open internet. So when they're scanning for things like open ports and IP addresses, this is immediately what they can see. They can then use that to access a particular Kubernetes container. Now, this Kubernetes container runs this particular image, and this image has all of these vulnerabilities on it. Now, normally within your environment, you wouldn't have this many vulnerabilities on a particular image, but this is our demo environment just to show you what that could potentially look like. And this image also has secrets that are hard-coded onto it, which is never best practice, but we know sometimes can happen. Now, this attacker, using the open internet, has access to a particular Kubernetes container, and they can move laterally within the organization to access this particular Docker image through these vulnerabilities. And with these secrets, they can gain access to this particular IAM user. Now, this user has a lot of different permissions. And one of those permissions is that they can access this S3 bucket. And this bucket has things like name and email information on it. So really, all in one go, you can see from start to finish how an attacker could view your whole entire cloud footprint, what they could potentially access, and how vulnerable you are to that potential risk. So if I go back into this now, what we can do is we know that there is a potential issue here. We know that there are risks associated with it. Now I need to remediate. So what is it that I need to do to actually go and remediate? Obviously, there are lots of major issues here. Let's say I'm a vulnerability manager and I want to fix this particular vulnerability. I want to update the base container image for this particular vulnerability, and I want to do it on Terraform because that's how I run everything. What the Wiz platform then does is it goes and generates the line-by-line code that you would need to go in and fix your infrastructure as code. And this does it all basically just so that you can copy and paste that particular fix into your code, and does it all. It basically trained on internal data, so there aren't any kind of hallucinations. So this is a very clear way that you can see where you're most impacted, where your highest and most critical risks are, and then potentially how you can go and remediate that as quickly as possible. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys. Now, another thing that I like to show you, if I go back into my lenses here, let's say I work in the SOC and I'm really keen to understand the threats in my environment. One thing that we see a lot of is threats and vulnerabilities in the news. And one thing that our research team does is it works around the clock to basically understand all of these new potential vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, and how is it that we can actually go in and reduce that risk footprint. So if I were to, for example, here search for log4j, I can see that there is a potential critical vulnerability here. This is done in 2021, so it's slightly old, but I can also see that there are 19 graph search results here. So in 19 different ways, I'm affected by this particular issue. And this runs for every single new vulnerability that is loaded. So for example, Shai-Hulud 2, you could search for that. And if you are affected by that particular instance, you could go in and see exactly where that is affecting you. And actually, if those are things that you need to go in and drill down on immediately, because those are critical risks, as you could see earlier. So this is really useful to understand the risk, kind of the noise from the actual truth. And to understand actually how you're affected by different threats. And the final thing that I'd like to go through, let's say I manage all aspects of security, but really I do it from a compliance perspective. What you can do is we have a compliance posture report. And now we have over 300 different frameworks, but let's say I look at SOC 2, for example. What the Wiz platform does is it looks at my whole entire cloud footprint, and it can tell me that compared to that particular SOC 2 framework, I'm 53% at posture readiness. Now, we all know that actually finding information and delivering all of these kind of posture reports is incredibly difficult, but the fact that it's done automatically based on these frameworks can be incredibly useful. And also you can go in and customize that to your organization's will as well. So really what it can do is try to make things a lot easier to understand, things more visible, and also easier to remediate for you as well. With that, I'll hand back to Saepio.
Thanks, Abdullah. And with that, an hour's over, everyone. So thank you very much for your time today. If you want any more information about any of those challenges or solutions that we've introduced you to today, please do reach out to your Saepio contacts and account managers or the solutions team directly. More than happy to have a conversation about it at any stage, and hopefully we'll see you next week for the second half of this session. So thank you again, and thanks to all the contributors as well.
Thank you.